Have you ever had a podcast guest not show up on time, or maybe miss the interview completely, or maybe they just didn't fill out your onboarding form, or they totally weren't prepared, they weren't even sure what they were doing there, or you just felt disrespected by them as a podcast guest coming to your platform as the host? If you've ever had any of this happen, you're probably not alone. I'd say for myself, I've had this happen as well, and so many other podcast hosts have as well. And what I want to talk about today is how we can help our podcast guest do better during the onboarding process and to show up in a better light. If I've not met you, my name is Alex Sanfilippo, and I'm so excited that you're here and really glad to be talking about this because I am passionate about being able to help us as hosts level up so that the guest actually can show up in the best possible light, and we can really help them follow our process a bit better. So the first thing I want to share is kind of like an example of this, but I've got a friend who every girl he dates is crazy. At least that's what he tells me. He's like, man, everyone I date is just crazy. And I always tell him, like, bro, common denominator, you're the crazy one. If everyone's crazy around you, maybe it's you, right? And so as a podcast host, if all of our guests are always late, they're always forgetting information, they're never doing what we want them to do, it might not be their fault. That might be on us for having a system that isn't really fluid enough for someone else to understand or follow. Now, I'm not calling you crazy, like my friend who dates crazy girls, right? Instead, what I'm saying is we need to look internally before we assume that all these people that are being our guests are all disrespectful or all not able to follow our guide or our information. First, we need to say, is there something on my end I can do to shift this in a way that will help the masses, the guests that are coming on my show, understand in a better way? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you my own experience because I've had people not show up for interviews. I've had people show up not knowing what the podcast was. I've had all that happen. But in the last few years, I've really honed it in a way that I don't have that stuff happening anymore. And I'm really excited to share this with you because it's been super helpful. So I hope this will be encouraging to you. And I'm just going to kind of spitball some of my favorite advice and the things that have helped me the most. I encourage you, look at your own internal process before looking at your guest and saying, how can I level this up so the process, the whole onboarding process of the interview can be better for them, the guest. So the first thing I want to do here is talk about our communication. We've got to use less words. I'm a guest on a lot of podcasts as well as having my own show, and we tend to be a little bit wordy with what it is that we're trying to get a guest to do. An example of this is recently I got an email, actually just yesterday, from someone whose podcast I was going to be on, and it was like, I think it had to be 5 or 6 paragraphs, and it was just so wordy and so long. And it started off with, here's how you use a microphone. Make sure that your door is closed. Make sure your AC is off. Make sure you have water and all those things. And here's the thing, like, not that anyone's above that, but if you take just 2 minutes to look up anything that I produce, you know how to turn on a microphone. You know my camera's ready. I'm studio ready. I've done this before. So the thing is we need to think about, okay, does first off this guest have enough experience that I need to send them this new thing, or can I just skip that altogether? In my case, they should have skipped it because I missed an onboarding form that I didn't even know existed because buried in paragraph 4, sentence number 3 was a link where I was supposed to fill out a form, but I didn't make it that far because I already said, this isn't for me. I know all this stuff. Now, here's the thing. If we're the guests, right, put yourself in their shoes. And you might be saying that email, but if you're in their shoes, you're probably going to skip it as well because our minds just tell us, this is all review. This is for somebody who's new. I don't need that. So again, when you communicate, use less words and get just the information that's truly relevant to that specific guest. And yes, it requires you taking an extra step, but the reality is you really shouldn't have people on your show that aren't the right fit. And you can only really know that if you just listen or watch for just a moment to ensure that, okay, I like the way that they're showing up. And here's the thing, sometimes, even if you get all this right, if you're not really vetting your guests that way, they might just be truly disrespectful people. And if they are, it doesn't matter how good your process is, they're going to show up in the wrong way. But the only way to actually know that is to look at how they're pitching, to listen and watch how they are with other shows. And that will give you the real understanding of, should I even move forward with this? So I encourage you up front, do a little bit of extra work and then figure out how you need to communicate directly with that person based off the experience or lack of experience that they have. And then only send them what's relevant in as few words as you possibly can. Say as little as you possibly can. I don't know if you're a fan of The Office. I love The Office. And Kevin Malone at one point says, why say lot words when few words do trick? I'm not telling you to use that type of language exactly, but you get the point, right? Why say lot words when few words do trick? You know exactly what I'm trying to say when I share that. SeaWorld, by the way, for anyone who is an Office fan. I digress. Okay. So the next thing here, once again, like we're saying less words now, only what they need, what's relevant truly to them. The next thing is the actual calendar invitation. You want everything on the calendar invitation. And I repeat that, everything on the calendar invitation. Now, some shows, I'm going to give two options here. Some shows have 2 calendar invitations, some have 1. 2 calendar invitations if you are doing a pre-interview call. A pre-interview call is a separate call to make sure that this guest is going to be a good fit for the second invitation, which is the actual interview. This is not a green room session, which happens just for the first 10, 15 minutes before you actually record. That still only needs 1 recording, and that's not a true pre-interview. The pre-interview is scheduled separately. So again, those are the 2 options. I'm not against or for either of them. I used to do a lot of pre-interview calls, but now I just do a better job of vetting my guests. I listen to them. I watch them more. I don't really need that because I make sure that they're also pros that are coming on my show because my show is about podcasting. So, but if you're saying I need a pre-interview call, we need to make sure this is going to work, that's fine. It's a separate calendar invitation. Now, if you have an onboarding form, then this is where you want to include it. You don't want it to be a separate form. You want to say, hey, let's get on a pre-interview call. I did my research, right? Do your research first. This looks good. Let's take 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, right? It needs to be specific. Here's the calendar link for that. It'll also have my onboarding form. Now, onboarding forms, I'm kind of against just a general onboarding form. It's not a best practice, despite what people might say in podcasting. Onboarding forms typically do not make sense, and I don't think you should have one. I do not have one. I don't suggest that you do. But if for some reason there is information that you feel you need, make sure it is on the actual calendar booking. Now, if you use a modern tool like calendly.com, you can actually just add those questions there, and that's why I suggest do not have a separate form. Now, but don't ask them for things like your name, right? Like you need it for that for the booking, sure, but don't ask them for their website if you have that. Anything that you're able to get from a Media One sheet, or if they're on example PodMatch.com and they have all that information, don't ask for that, because at the end of the day, you're going to be copy pasting it from somewhere. Cut them out as the middleman and just go straight to their profile and grab what you need. But if you're like, hey, I need to know what your giveaway is for my audience, sure, ask that. That's perfectly fine, right? If you're not going to do that during the pre-interview call, have that on the form. Just make sure that the form, again, is not repeat stuff that you need. And make sure they don't get asked this again. Don't send them an email later saying, be sure to fill out the onboarding form if they already filled it out. And then when they're booking, so if you're doing the pre-interview call and then they're booking the actual interview, don't ask them for that again. Capture it once when you need it, only stuff that you cannot copy paste and grab yourself very easily. That's the only time that I say, yes, an onboarding form is good if you have specific things that you need that you know you can't get anywhere else. But if you can get it, don't ask for it. Just cut them out as the middleman, and you can just grab it yourself because you'll have a better chance of them doing the rest of the stuff very much so accurately. So back to the calendar invitation having everything. So let's imagine you got your pre-interview call. What you want in the actual subject of it, so like the name of the event, is you want to say it, guest name, having a pre-interview call with, in my case, Alex Sanfilippo for podcast, and then put your podcast title. That's exactly what you want it to say. So again, there's no question. I cannot tell you how many times I'm getting ready for something that's on my calendar, but it just says call with Alex. And I'm like, there's no example. The domain they're using is a no reply email. I don't even know like what this is or what I'm about to step foot into because I might have booked it 4 months ago. You want it to be very clear. You want it to come from your email address. You want to explain it really well. If it's all in that main subject line, there's no question. And then the actual location, you want it to be where you're going to record. Do not say, we'll supply a link later. And then you wonder why your guest doesn't show up because you're sending it to them 2 minutes beforehand and they're not in their inbox, or you send it to the wrong email address, or you send it on a message on a social media platform and they already have everything off and they're like, oh wait, where am I supposed to be? Don't leave your guest guessing like that because they show up flustered when you do that. Just use the automations that pretty much every scheduling tool has at this point to automatically create the event for where it's going to be. And then the actual details of it. So if you're using like Google Calendar, the details let you explain more. Explain, here's a link to the show. Here's an episode I recommend for you. This is audio plus video. This is video or audio only. We're going to go for 26 to 30 minutes. Here's some things you might get asked. Just explain everything you can in that calendar invitation. That right there is so important to not send an extra email if you don't have to. We do not want to be over communicating because that's a huge problem. You want to keep the communication where it should be. So I'll give you an example of this. And I don't do the pre-interview, so I go straight to the interview. Here's an exact example of my recent one. The subject or the title of the event was Amy Porterfield being interviewed by Alex Sanfilippo on Podcasting Made Simple. The location was the recording studio room. And then in the details, it said it's 22 to 26 minutes. It's going to be audio plus video. Here's 3 episodes that I think Amy will enjoy to check out if she wants to just listen to a few seconds. Here is how you can contact me day of. If there's a problem, you can email here, you can text me here. I included all that on there. And then I have 2 reminders. One is an email reminder 27 minutes before, and the other one is a notification, a push notification 4 minutes before it starts. Boom, I'm done. There was nothing else for her to do. There was no email because I know that she has a great recording studio. I don't need to ask her all those questions. There's no onboarding form. I can already grab everything from her team from a media one sheet that she has, so I can copy paste myself. It was a seamless, easy process for her to be able to follow, and everything was on the calendar invite. So there's no last minute scrambling of like, oh man, where am I supposed to be? Or what was the host's name? Or I can't remember what show this was because they have 3 shows. How did we meet again? There's all these things that come up, and I'm telling you, when I'm a guest, I'm going on a lot of podcasts as a guest, this stuff happens to me almost every single week because the host is not doing the time up front to create a good calendar invitation. Okay, so calendar invitation, super important. You can have 2 if you have a pre-interview call, 1 if you don't. The other thing you don't want to do on this is do not say, show up 10 minutes early. Make the calendar invite for 10 minutes early to cover the time. My time with Amy, I knew we'd be recording for under 30 minutes. I put 45 on the calendar and didn't say anything about that, right? 45 on the calendar because that's what we agreed upon, so I could have 10 minutes up front and a few minutes afterwards without being like, show up early, stay a few minutes late. Don't do that because we live by our calendars, right? If the calendar says show up this time, don't say show up early. Say show up at that time. That's what we're all going to do. All the time, I realized after the fact I was supposed to be at an interview 10 minutes early, but they didn't put it 10 minutes early on the calendar. Just make it 10 minutes longer. That is the hack. That is the secret right there. Say what you want up front. Make the expectation very clear. Next thing here is to not oversend emails, which I already kind of hinted at. If all this stuff is already in the calendar invitation and you can see that that guest has accepted the invitation, which you can on most calendar apps, if there's like the little green check that they've accepted it, then don't email them. The only time you want to email them or reach out to them is saying, hey, I noticed you hadn't accepted the calendar invitation. Just want to check. Have you seen that yet? Can you go ahead and accept it? Other than that, you don't need to reach out. The only thing you can do is if you really want that double up, you can say, hey, I noticed you saw the calendar invitation. Be sure to click into that. In the details section, I put like some links and some other things in case you are interested in any of that. You can just share all that there, but the reality is the calendar is going to take care of itself. So don't be asking for them to give you an email address so you can send them more stuff. You don't need to do that. Don't add them to an email list. Don't send them anything that is unnecessary, right? And if you need them to listen to an episode, tell them, put that in there, and then make that the one thing you reach out saying, hey, make sure you listen to one beforehand. Here's the one I suggest for you based off of your experience and what you like. So here's the thing. All this matters. It helps the guest show up in the best possible light, and it helps us look like heroes because we're the only organized host in town, right? They knew exactly what they're getting into. They're going to show up in a better light. They're going to show up more prepared to add a lot of value to your audience, and they're probably not going to make any mistakes along the way of missing things because you made it all seamless and very, very clear for them. It's so important that we take the time as hosts to look internally first before we point the finger and say, why are no guests doing what I want them to do? Maybe it's on us. Communicate with as few words as possible. Send as few emails as possible. Make it all as automated as you possibly can. Take some of the weight on yourself, and I promise you, you will create a better experience for you and for your guest. I hope this was helpful for you, and I'm really excited for your next interview and all future interviews to be a lot more seamless because you created a great process for your guests.